everyone. Hello. Welcome to tonight's program, both to all of you here in the building and also to all of you joining us on our library YouTube live stream. I'm Carrie Coogan. I'm Deputy Director of Community Engagement and Public Affairs for the library, and we're so glad that you're here to join us for this important conversation. Before we begin, there's a couple of quick reminders. The Kansas City Public Library is currently gathering community input for our next strategic planning process, and we want to hear from all of you. So if you could find the signs and the QR codes, they're stationed throughout the area here, or else go online. You can find a QR code, or you can just simply take the survey. It's very short, and it just takes a few minutes, and you can help imagine the library of the future. And we can't do it without you, so please take a few moments to do that. Thank you. There's also a quick note for those of you that parked in our garage right across the street. We validate ticketing, so it's right down there on the end. You just put your ticket in and out, and you will have free parking for the evening. Okay, one other quick note. We have 25 students here from the Kinder Institute for Constitutional Democracy Constitution Camp. Welcome. They're here to learn about the Constitution and how to have a civil dialogue. So thank you all so much for being here today. Tonight's conversation couldn't be more timely or more urgent. According to U.S. News and World Report, nearly 90 million eligible Americans didn't vote in the last presidential election. And yet, many of those same individuals have very strong opinions. Some of those opinions have been pushed to the extremes. So, what's missing? What's missing is dialogue, respectful, informed, face-to-face dialogue. For hundreds of years, libraries have served as civic acres, places where ideas are explored, facts are respected, and diverse perspectives are welcomed. And that remains true today. Civil civic discourse is not just compatible with democracy, it's essential to democracy. And that's why we're so honored to host this evening's program presented in partnership with the Kinder Institute on Constitutional Democracy from the University of Missouri. A heartfelt thank you to our partners and to our outstanding panelists you'll meet in just a moment, and to all of you, the audience, for showing up, for caring about the health of our democracy, and for being willing to listen and to learn from one another. We're thrilled to welcome Jay Becker and Lorelle to Kansas City. Both are proud University of Missouri alumni and the co-founders of Civil Dialogues, a project born in 2024 from a shared belief that respectful conversations can help bridge divides and strengthen our democracy. Jay Becker served as the Chief of Staff to President George H.W. Bush after he left the White House, and is the best-selling author of The Man I Knew, a deeply personal and insightful portrait of the 41st president's post-presidency. She brings a wealth of experience in public life, leadership, and civic engagement, and we're honored to have her here with us tonight. Moderating the evening's discussion is Lorelle, an Emmy Award-winning journalist and longtime television anchor known for her thoughtful approach to storytelling and dialogue. She'll guide the conversation tonight. We also invite you to be a part of the conversation. You'll see roving microphones during the Q&A portion of the evening, and you're welcome to submit questions via text as well. And just one quick ask, please make it a question. A genuine, curious, open-ended question. That's how dialogue grows. Thank you again for being here tonight. And now please join me in welcoming Jay Becker.
Oh my goodness, the sun. We don't see that in Texas very much these days. Anyway, thank you for coming tonight. I know there's a lot of things you could do on the summer evening, so thank you for being here. I do want to let you know that I grew up in Missouri on a farm. I left Missouri in 1981, and I've lived in Houston for 32 years. About 20 minutes from where the Houston Texans play football. I'm a big Kansas City Chiefs fan. Okay, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm a huge St. Louis Cardinal fan. And for those of you who remember this, Jorge Orta was out series for USA Today, and Steve agrees with me that he was out, so whatever. And one more note before we talk about civil dialogues, I can't help it. So my dad and his twin sister were the oldest of 9 kids. I'm one of 39 Becker grandchildren. My dad and his twins, their names were Joseph and Mary. And Aunt Mary's 2 daughters are here tonight. So, okay, it's time to talk about civil dialogues. While I was serving as President Bush's Chief of Staff, I became friends with Linda Lorelle, who was the anchor of the NBC station in Houston for 17 years. She was President Bush's favorite local TV anchor, and over the years we became friends. A couple of years ago, we were sitting in a bar. Okay, I lied. We were having lunch, but it's such a better story if we're in a bar. So let's pretend we're sitting in a bar, and our conversation turned to how concerned we were about our democracy. And we decided it was time to stop yelling at our TV sets and to do something, to do anything to try to make a difference in our country. We began a conversation with the heads of the George and Barbara Bush Foundation, the foundations of the LBJ and Clinton libraries, and the Kinder Institute at the University of Missouri. And we kicked off our civil dialogue series at the Becker Institute at Rice University about 1.5 years ago. Since then, we have talked about immigration. We're coming back here to talk about immigration in September. We'll tell you about that later. We've talked about immigration, climate change, the importance of bipartisanship, the Middle East, and shortly after the election in November, we had another event, just what did the election results mean? If nothing else, you cannot call us cowards. We will talk about just about anything. The idea of civil dialogues is to give you a chance to listen to the experts who can talk about various sides of every issue. Every issue has various sides. And then you get a chance to ask your questions, to voice your concerns, and make your opinion known. No shouting, no name calling, no vitriol, just dialogue, civil dialogue. Tonight we tackle the people, the president, and the Constitution. Your questions answered. I want to start the evening by asking you this question. What the hell are we doing? Oh, wait a minute, I'm trying to give up cursing. So never mind. So instead I will share with you 2 book covers. If we could put up the first, if you look at your screens, this is a book I wrote about George H.W. Bush's character and what we can learn from him. Although the book came out 1 year ago, I still get invitations from all over the country to speak about this book, Character Matters. The last speech I gave was in Branson to the Missouri State School Board Association, 1,500 members proud. I'm doing 21 events this year on Character Matters, and it's only July. You could say there appears to be a hunger out there to talk about character. By contrast, a good friend of mine just gave me this book. A little spicy, a little interesting. Fortunately, if you can't see it, we'll tell you later what it says. Okay, the students, don't look at that. No. Fortunately for most of you, you don't have to read it. Jay Sexton from the Kinder Institute will answer your questions tonight. But the title again begs the question, what the hell are we doing? I want to challenge you to think about our expectations of our elected leaders. I don't care who you voted for. I don't care what party you belong to. As voters, we all should have expectations. And among those expectations is that our leaders should show the willingness to do what is right, to show moral courage and fortitude, and to show character. I was blessed to work for someone who was all that and more. In 1990, President Bush was determined to bounce the budget. Does that sound familiar? In order to do so, he did something that so few politicians today seem willing to do. He compromised. I'm not sure when that became a dirty word. He agreed to a minimal tax increase in exchange for budget cuts from the Democrats. Early in the process, while meeting with his economists on what it was going to take to balance the budget, he wrote the following in his diary. I think some of these proposals could mean a one-term presidency, but it's that important for the country. Unfortunately, he was right. He lost the 1992 election. The budget deal took him down. It probably made Ross Perot run as a third-party candidate. It's the same budget deal which the Wall Street Journal later credited for the robust economy during the 1990s. It was right for the country. It was not right for him personally. That's what we need to demand of all of our elected officials, that they do what's right for us, not what's right for them personally. You all need to get tougher. Speaking of Bill Clinton, well, that was the man he lost to in 1992. They became famously known as the odd couple. There they are. That's a picture of them in Indonesia. They became partners, and over 10 years, they joined together to raise hundreds of millions of dollars in disaster relief funds, from the tsunami that hit South Asia in 2004, that's where in Indonesia there, to Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, to Hurricane Ike in Texas. They were able to put aside their political differences and disagreements and find a common cause. That cause was us. We were their cause. Again, they raised hundreds of millions of dollars for people who've been struck by natural disasters. When Hurricane Harvey dumped 40 inches of rain on Houston in 2017, all the former presidents came together to help raise money. This is a picture of them at Texas A&M. That's every single living former president. They all came together. I want you to ignore the woman in the back of the photo who appears to be photobombing the former presidents. I would never do that. I tried to tell a recent audience that, and I was wearing the exact same top. So, I love the message this photo conveys. A camaraderie where differences are set aside for what's right, for what's best for the country. This is the way it is supposed to work, and this is what we need to get back to. And that's why Linda and I founded Civil Dialogues. We need to get back to where these five men with their political differences can be in the same room and for a common cause. And we raised $40 million that night, mainly because Obama brought Lady Gaga with him, but that's another whole story. I will tell you one quick funny story that I need to turn this over to Linda. For years, President Bush was asked about his friendship with President Clinton. Some of his conservative friends were like, oh my God, how can you be friends with him? And President Bush said, you know, I think he was the father President Clinton never had. But President Bush would always say, you know, here's the deal. I'm old. I've run out of things to say. And Bill does all the talking, so I don't have to worry about it. I want you to look at this photo. Who's talking? 5 former presidents, and it's Bill Clinton. Anyway, before I turn it over to Linda, I just briefly want to talk about what's going on in Texas. We are still grieving the loss of lives in the July 4th Hill Country floods, especially all those little girls who were lost at Camp Mystic. The outpouring nationwide has been amazing, but there also have been a lot of just plain mean social media postings. You know, what is wrong with people from the left and the right? Demanding what happened, how did it happen? It's uncalled for. There's time for those questions. And what really makes me sad is you will not see a photo like that from this storm. This kind of camaraderie for now has been put on a back bench. We need to get back to this. In his eulogy of President Bush, historian John Meacham said, "It was and is the most American of creeds, Abraham Lincoln's better angels of our nature, and George H.W. Bush's thousands of points of light. They are companion verses in America's national hymn. For Lincoln and Bush both called on us to choose the right over convenient, to hope rather than to fear, to heed not our worst impulses, but our best instincts. And that's why we're here tonight. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to my partner, Linda Lorelle. Carrie already told you a little bit about her. 17 years as the anchor of the NBC station in Houston. She now has Lorelle Media in Houston. She's one of the most talented people I know. And while she's walking up here, I confess there's one more thing I'm going to say. Walk slowly. So one of my former staffers' best friend's daughter died in the flood on July 4th. A little second grader died. And the last video her mother has of her daughter is taking her to camp, and her little girl was sitting in the back seat singing Taylor Swift songs the entire 3-hour journey to camp. So the funeral is Saturday, and the mother has asked my friend Hutton to try to get a note from Taylor Swift to be read at the funeral. And I've been trying to help her, but we struck out. So I'm here to say in Kansas City, if any of you all hang out with Travis and Taylor, see me afterwards. Thank you very much, Linda.
Thanks, Jean. I'm really glad that Jean reminded us all of the disastrous Hill Country floods and the recovery efforts that are still ongoing. As of this afternoon, 3 people are still missing. The devastating images and heartbreaking stories certainly captured the nation's attention. And as you said, Jean, the outpouring of support has been tremendous, which kind of got me to thinking, why does it take a disaster to remind us that we're all human and deserving of life, regardless of our skin color, regardless of what country we were born in or our spiritual beliefs, or who we or our parents might have voted for in the last election? A couple of days ago, I ran across a Facebook post from a friend who happens to be the Chief Recovery and Resilience Officer for the City of Houston. And here's part of what Angela Blanchard said in that post. After disasters, we can see how glad people are to be rid of self-centeredness as they fling themselves into the arena to help, to declare themselves part of a collective, a community. It's worth noting that for years now, after every disaster, we have to tell people to stop coming to help. That outpouring of help reflects our hunger to belong, to have a shared, pure purpose. When the unthinkable happens, we set aside individual identities and labels and wade into the muck and mud and belong. That's what Angela had to say. So that is what we are collectively doing here tonight. We are wading into the muck and the mud to gain a better understanding of the significant challenges facing our country and a better understanding of each other, especially those on the opposite side of our beliefs. No labels, as Jean said, no name calling, just civil dialogue. And at the end of the evening, our hope is that each of us feels we belong. Now, following our panel discussion, Jean and I will join you in the audience to take your questions. You are a huge part of this. The whole title is about your questions answered. We're going to get to as many of them as we can, both here in the room and those of you who are joining us online. So we're going to get the conversation started. I'm going to ask someone to come up and remove the podium as I begin to introduce our panelists. Thank you. Our first panelist is Woody Kozad, a prominent attorney and founder of Kozad Company Government Relations. Prior to starting his firm, Woody practiced law at Stinson, Morrison, Hecker for 30 years. He served as chairman of the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission and as a member of the University of Missouri Board of Curators. As former chairman of the Missouri Republican Party from 1995 to 1999, Woody coordinated key campaigns to shift control of the Missouri congressional delegation to the Republican Party for the first time in the state's history. Please welcome Woody to the stage.
Thank you.
Thanks. Originally from Lee's Summit, Quinn Shepard graduated summa cum laude, thank you very much, from Mizzou in spring 2024 with degrees in constitutional democracy and history, with a minor in political science. During her time as an undergraduate, Quinn served as president of It's On Us. She participated in the Kinder Scholars DC summer program, where she was a political planning and action intern with the National Women's Political Caucus. Quinn earned her MA in Atlantic History and Politics at the Kinder Institute in May of 2025 and was named a Fulbright Award semifinalist. She's such a slacker. I mean, Quinn, come on. Quinn Shepard, please get up here. Thank you, Quinn. Jay Sexton is director of Mizzou's Kinder Institute on Constitutional Democracy, a nonpartisan center for the teaching and study of the founding and history of the United States. In his classes, students explore how the fate of American constitutional democracy has always been inseparable from the global fortunes of democracy. He has learned much about how to navigate tribal hatred by virtue of being a KU alum who lives and breathes Jayhawk basketball and lives and works in Columbia, Missouri. He takes booze from Tiger Faithful in good spirits. Please welcome Jay. And last but certainly not least, Kathy Kiely is the Lee Hills Chair in Free Press Studies at the Missouri School of Journalism. Before joining Mizzou in 2018, she spent nearly 4 decades covering regional and national politics for a wide range of news organizations, including USA Today, the New York Daily News, and the Houston Post. She began working as a Washington correspondent in 1981 when George Herbert Walker Bush was vice president. Please welcome Kathy Kiely to the stage. Okay, it is time to start this conversation. So Jay, I always like to put you on the hot seat first, so I'm going to tell you. I read a really fascinating article that posits that President Trump has revealed a gaping hole in the Constitution, because the Constitution is built on a foundation of good faith and buy-in that no longer holds. That's what this article said. Polling in April showed that 57% of Americans believe that we are in a constitutional crisis. So as the expert on the Constitution, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a bummer of a way to start, but that's a great question.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I think everyone should be worried about how the Constitution fits into our current political climate and our polarization. But what is the name of this panel? It's the people, the president, and the Constitution. The United States has been around for 250 years, or it will be this July. We've had some really divisive and bad presidents. You can think of Buchanan. We've had presidents that are just like invisible nothing burgers. When Calvin Coolidge died, people said, how can you tell? Okay? So we've had bad presidents. We've also had a constitution that was created in a completely different world, the late 18th century. A completely different world. The problems it was trying to solve no longer existed. The problems were very different 100 years later, and different yet again 200 years later, and different yet again 250 years later. But yet the Constitution has endured. So I guess what I'm trying to spit out is the thing that I'm most concerned about when one takes the long historical view isn't the president or the Constitution, it's the people. It's the people. When Alexis de Tocqueville came and visited American democracy, the French aristocrat in the early 19th century, he wrote about presidents, he wrote about the Constitution, but he said the real power, the genius of the United States was its people. The people were highly literate. They were scientifically innovative. They were organized. It was a nation of joiners. When the Soviets looked at us in the second half of the 20th century, and they looked at the United States, what they were afraid of wasn't that we had more bombs or more planes or tanks or more bars of gold. It was that we had a more united and competitive civil society, that our people were at once competing against one another to innovate in a market economy, yet were joined together. Soviets knew deep down they could never compete with that. Problem today is, do we still have that? Are we still organized? Are we still innovative? Can we still compete yet remain united in what is a very volatile and hostile world system? I think that the answer is yes, but I think that the more we blame presidents or old acts of legislation, or indeed even our constitutional framework, that is a red herring. That's not the problem. The problem is that we need to start solving it ourselves.
So with that in mind, we talk about the people not being involved. Woody, I want to bring you in on this while we're talking a little bit about the long view and the historical perspective. You've certainly been around politics for several decades now, and you've seen a lot of the changes. So pick up on what Jay was saying and where you think the people play in this scenario that helped get us to this point that we're in right now.
Before I respond to your question, I have to say I was brought here under false pretenses. I was told we were going to have a civil discourse, and then Gene comes up here and casts slurs on the Royals' 1985 World Series victory. And if I were going to complain about the outcome of the series, I would not do it in behalf of the team that put together the lowest team batting average in the history of a 7-game World Series ever. They batted 186. So, now back to the people.
But he digresses.
These wonderful women who have noble souls, and they have undertaken what I view as a very difficult task, which is to educate us barbarians about civility. They can't do it with me. I'm 80 years old. It's too late. Maybe they can do it with the rest of you. I think that civility, this capacity, as pictures were up here, I guess, of Clinton and H.W. together and so on, our capacity to do that depends on something deeper than civility, which I regard as a secondary or tertiary virtue. It's still an important virtue. It's a very useful virtue, which is why it's a virtue. It is useful to the civil person because he'll win friends and influence people and get ahead better than if he just punches them in the nose. It is useful to society because we will get along better and work more efficiently and more likely reach our common goals if we are civil with one another. But civility is this beautiful fruit. It grows on a vine. Kill the vine, the fruit cannot survive. And the vine isn't another virtue, and I would say a primary virtue. And now abideth these three: faith, hope, and charity. But the greatest of these is charity. And what we have chopped down, chopped up, burned, and thrown the ashes in the Missouri River on is charity. The minute, if you're over on the right, the minute you hear that Chuck Schumer said or did X, you default to the vilest possible motive to explain what he has said or done. And the minute you hear Donald Trump, if you're on the other end, his motive cannot possibly be good. It's just got to be awful. And we have 24-hour-a-day news channels that encourage that. They sell drugs. The drugs are outrage and fear. That's what they sell. And if you don't think you can get hooked on them, you don't know anybody who watches them all day. And they can't live without their dose of outrage and fear. And so they're watching it every day, and they're mad and they're afraid. People who are mad and afraid are unlikely to be civil with one another. And so I think I'm with Jay. It's us. You want to see the problem? Trump's the symptom. We're the problem. We elected him. If you don't like him, fine. But we elected him on a system the Constitution lays out. And if that's a problem, The problem ultimately has to come back to us. Edmund Burke said long ago, no people had a government better than they are for very long. And that's our problem. We're not charitable about the people we disagree with and how we view what they think and say.
I love that you went there with that, because charity, it's giving each other grace. It's understanding that, you know, we're all coming from a place of basically wanting the same thing out of life. Quinn, I would love to know, as the youngest person on this panel, what you and your peers are thinking in this moment as you watch those of us who are a little bit on the older side sort of fight with each other, and you see kind of the state of the country, and as you think about your future and what it looks like, tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are on this.
Well, I will say I don't think the fighting is limited to the older side, as you said. I think social media in general has really inflamed a lot of tensions, and I think that's true for all Americans. But I do think my generation might be even more affected by that, because so much of our lives has been lived on social media. We don't necessarily remember a time where it hasn't been, and algorithms are designed in such a way that you are fed things that you believe, that you agree with, that you like, but at the same time, with the other side, whatever opinion you disagree with, you're fed the most extreme version of that, the kind that will get engagements and clicks. So it sort of contributes to that non-charitable view of anyone who might disagree with you. And to that point, we're struggling to communicate on social media because of those algorithms, but also because of AI, I think. As more and more people are using AI to communicate with one another, to understand what one another is saying, I think that's really going to harm our ability to understand and be charitable to one another, to use your words.
I love that you talked about AI and how difficult it is to communicate on social media. I think I saw something recently where there's some I don't know, a little movement that's going on where some younger people are putting their phones down and they're not engaging in social media as much and trying to engage in person-to-person, face-to-face contact. How about that? What a concept. What a concept. It's so much easier to hate on screen when you're not looking someone in the eye and you don't see the impact of somebody's words or actions on them. So Kathy, I want to bring you into this conversation about the impact of not only social media, but also the mainstream media, and Woody brought it up a moment ago, talking about the news silos that we live in. You know, we now live in an age, you know, when I went to journalism school and when you did, I mean, I was at the tail end of the Edward R. Murrow School of Journalism, okay? I was at the tail end of that, and then it started, and then we got news organizations that are devoted to one point of view or the other, and so now we have the option of selecting where we want to get our news from, knowing that it's going to reinforce what we already believe. And that's why part of the reason that we're in this mess. So I'd love to get your perspective on this.
Yeah, you know, I teach a class at Mizzou that really addresses this problem. I mean, we talk about this, and it's really about, one thing you learn when you're a professor, I was a journalist for many years, and when I came in, I was a newbie, and I found out an important thing, which is never create a new class. Because there are so many curriculum committees and subcommittees that maybe your grandchildren might get to see it. But so I took an old class called Confronting Controls on Information, which I'm sure when it was originally taught was about trying to be a reporter in Eastern Europe. And but I really have made it about I took it down to the studs and remodeled it inside, but I kept the historic facade, and so I could get it through the curriculum committee. And but what it's really about is algorithmic mind control. And you're right that if you look back at over the arc of the last couple of decades in media, you start to see the balkanization of audience beginning in the early 1980s when C-SPAN was invented, right? We had a channel for news, for congressional political junkies, people like Jay. And then we had CNN, you know, news junkies, people like me. And then there was ESPN. And so gradually, and it developed so that then you had the Golf Channel, and then you eventually had, in the 1990s, Fox News, which was a channel for people who had a specific ideological bent. So we started to see pulling apart then. The internet put that on steroids. And whether you know it or not, AI has been a part of your life for a long time. Algorithms really are a form of AI. And my students think that, you know, I sometimes will come in and I'll actually carry a newspaper, you know, the actual paper thing. And they look at me funny, you know, because I say, I know, you think I'm crazy, because why would anybody pay for this? Because you can get this all for free, right? Well, you know, Milton Friedman said there is no such thing as a free lunch. And you pay for these free services with the information you provide. And there are big companies like Axiom that are just data mining companies. They take your credit card information, your zip code, your age, you know, it's like, Kathy Kiely, why are we showing her wrinkle cream ads? You know, I mean, they know a lot about you. And so that information, it used to be used strictly to tailor your advertisements. But now it is being used to tailor your news feeds. Because Facebook, Google, Snapchat, you name them, they make money by selling ads, and they sell ads by attracting eyeballs. And they don't keep you on their sites. Woody's right. It is designed to be addictive, and they don't keep you on your sites by giving you stories that make you uncomfortable. So it's a recipe for never having your mind change, and it's a recipe for never having your received opinions challenged. And that's very dangerous to democracy.
So I want to talk a little bit about free speech and freedom of the press, because it feels like there's been some serious assault on that. Before I come back to you, because I know you've got some things you want to share, and I do want to get into prior restraint, and I want to talk about that, but I want to get the historical view from you, Jay, about this, about where we are right now.
Yeah, it's a troubling moment, and when we're talking about fundamental protections being under threat. There's absolutely no question about that. There's a reason why that the Bill of Rights was attached to the Constitution. The Constitution was primarily first about the architecture of government. How would the government be constructed? How would power be divided? Which branches would do what? But then it was also about, hey, the Constitution, what constitutes the nation? It's not just the government, it's the people, and it's all of their rights as individuals, but also in the aggregate. So freedom of the press is just foundational to anything that comes to with the United States. Yes, it's under threat. I would say that it's under threat particularly right now, but this is a long-running thing that isn't just about executive actions or about acts of Congress. It's also about what are the markets out there for free expression of ideas? How do social institutions and non-state institutions also regulate and restrict speech in their own right? The news stories about the federal government get all of the traction, but it's a wider problem that we can solve from the bottom up first, to go back to the people being the agents in this process.
So I want to come back to you, Kathy, while we're on this subject now, to talk about prior restraint and how journalists go about sourcing their stories, how that is changing sort of right before our eyes, because there are fewer and fewer people who are willing to go on the record and put their name and their face to something that might be perceived as not being in line with the administration's goals. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think there's, freedom of the press can be eroded, and when we say freedom of the press, it's not a reporter's right to go get a story. It's your right to get the information that that reporter is providing. So that the freedom of the press is really about freedom of speech, freedom of thought. It's the idea that why do we have freedom of the press? So that you can get the information you need to have intelligent debates, make intelligent decisions about who to vote for. So that, I think, is a necessary predicate because too many people in power who would rather not have the scrutiny of the press like to pretend this is some privileged class of reporters who are trying to, exercise some special right. That's not what this is about. It's about your right to get the information. And where I see it eroding, it's very insidious. So as you mentioned, there are fewer people who are willing to talk to reporters. And that is because particularly government, but also corporate employees are afraid of reprisals. And of course, in a digital age, it's harder for reporters to protect their sources. And so you have to take elaborate measures, and you can't always promise that you're going to be able to keep people absolutely confidential. So that has been a real chilling effect, I think, in terms of the type of reporting we're able to do. The other thing, and I think this is one of the things that Jay was alluding to, back in the 70s when there were a series of major Supreme Court decisions that really established some of the press freedoms that we talk about today, particularly Times versus Sullivan, those cases were pushed by media organizations that had very deep pockets. They don't have deep pockets anymore. The digital disruption has left a lot of media organizations in a much more financially vulnerable position. And that means not only do they have less appetite to take on those legal fights, but they also start to think, before you take on a story, do I want to do this story if it's going to mean a lawsuit? Right. And more we're seeing nuisance lawsuits that are filed. And believe me, you can have a lawsuit that is really a libel suit that will have no standing whatsoever. There's no way that the person suing will win, and it's still going to cost the media organization a lot of money. The meter starts to run, and that has a real chilling effect, I think. And unfortunately, what I worry about more is self-censorship by media organizations that don't want the legal fight.
Yeah. So as the attorney on the panel, Woody, would love to hear your thoughts about what Kathy was just saying about how some corporations are going to do whatever they can to avoid a legal fight, and so they're just sort of obeying in advance, if you will.
During Bleeding Kansas here, you're in the heart of the place where we invented terrorism for political purposes. And during Bleeding Kansas, the Southerners brought their slaves up and they stopped at the Kansas border. They bought land here in Missouri. They couldn't go over there because Kansas might become a free state, and they had property. Slaves, they didn't want to lose them. There's an old saying, capital is timid, always has been. This is not a new development. And so they stayed here, they bought land in Kansas, they voted in Kansas, but their property, their slaves, their property as they saw it, were still in Missouri. Well, you're looking at the timidity of capital, and it is not a new thing. I'll tell you what I'm worried about. The Emperor Caligula, in the area of free speech and a free press, the Emperor Caligula once said, "I wish the human race had a single neck so I could wring it." And you and I have helped Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and the rest of them create a single neck that can be wrung. And it's that thing it's in my back pocket right now, your phone, this thing. This is the only way we communicate anymore. And because that's so, if you can cut that off somehow, if you can control it somehow, you really have achieved censorship. In Europe, they have now what they call the Digital Services Act. Remember, first of all, they have no First Amendment. And the Digital Services Act says to Mr. Musk, who postures as a friend of free speech, and he is in favor of free speech as long as it's his. But he also says free speech is not free reach. You can post it on Twitter or X. That doesn't mean very many people are going to see it. And I promise you they're not going to see it in Europe, because I got an algorithm to make sure that doesn't happen. Because if Woody Kozad were to sit up here today and say, for example, New York is now 11% Jewish and 9% Muslim, and I don't think it's going to work out well. He better not let that get posted in Europe. And so, they can fine him up to 7% of his revenue.
Okay.
And so he's censoring what we say every day because of what he's afraid of in Europe.
Okay, I think Jay wants to jump in. What
Real quick, when those slaveholders stopped at the border and wanted to settle in Kansas, and this is a story about the importance of freedom of the press and free politics, first thing they tried to do was vote in those Kansas territorial elections to stack the territorial government with pro-slavery candidates. And when that was kind of not working, or was working only kind of, step two, that initial sacking of Lawrence, that wasn't yet a total act of political terrorism. What was the target in May of 1856? They went to the two anti-slavery newspapers, both on Massachusetts Street. Both had steam-powered printing presses, which were a rarity in the American West in the period. They went into those newspaper offices, picked up the printing presses, and threw them in the Kansas River, destroying them. But actually, the anti-slavery people fixed, because they were innovative and literate and scientific, they could fix the printing presses. But that's how important it was understood at the time, and that's how important freedom of the press remains today.
Okay, I'm coming out into the audience, and while I'm doing that, Quinn, I have a question for you. As a recent graduate in constitutional democracy, history, minor in political science, you mentioned already AI and where you think some of the social media and the digital space is concerning to you. What are you most concerned about as you embark upon your career and as you have conversations with your peers about what the future looks like?
Yeah, I think the most recent development has been with the recent passage of the Big Beautiful Bill. A lot of my friends and I are entering graduate school, professional school, and there's now a cap on federal student loans that's $200,000 total and $50,000 a year. You can't exceed those numbers, which isn't really realistic for financing school unless you have scholarships, parents that are helping you out, things like that. So right now, I think for people my age, it really feels like we've gotten a bit of a bad deal with the current political state. And yeah, it's not looking great on that front, but I do have a lot of hope for our constitutional democracy with events like this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, who's got a question? We've got one right here.
Thank you very much. I'd like to introduce economics into this conversation. Back in 08, 09, they had a collapse of the economy. Many people were foreclosed out of their homes, and middle-class people who thought they were middle class, I suppose, ended up with nothing. And so my question is, do you not agree that foreclosure, especially in the millions, foreclosure does something to somebody? If you think you're in the chips and all of a sudden you're foreclosed and you have nothing, or you know somebody who was, don't you think that takes that civility down several notches because you're no longer secure economically, you're afraid, you saw what happened? Don't you think that might have some problem with this? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody want to jump in there,
I'll
Kathy?
say, I think, I remember covering the presidential campaign that year, and I think one of the problems that we're having in this society, Jay may disagree with me, but we call this a democracy, but it's really become an oligarchy. And I think that's what you're talking about. One of the things that I would say, I think I absolutely agree with everything Jay said, that it really is up to us to change things. But one of the things that people have to realize is the impact of big money in politics and in policy making. And I have certainly seen it in my career. And I think what you're alluding to is people were very angry after the 2008 meltdown that bankers came out okay and average people did not. And I think, certainly what I've seen, my reporter's eye view, is that Congress has become much more enthralled to big money, and I think that's a big part of the reason for that frustration that I think you're alluding to.
Okay, we have a question from a Kinder student.
So with each new technology, like radio, then television, then social media, then artificial intelligence, people say that these things divide us. And I'm just wondering if you think that it's because we're seeing a new technology and we're kind of afraid of that, or if you think that these issues kind of stack on top of each other and further divide us with each technology.
That's a great question. That's a high school student.
I was going to say, what high school are you from?
All these high school students. You know, don't forget when the printing press was invented, like in the days of the early modern period, the 30 Years' War followed not that long after, and what it did was that it just accelerated the pace of debate and conflict. And you can think of all kinds of examples in which new forms of communications have done that, but you can also think of the inverse, can't you? You can think about President Lincoln. He was the master tweeter of his age. I mean, they didn't tweet in those days, but he manipulated a new technology called the public letter, where he would actually write a letter to an associate, knowing that that associate would then publish the letter in the local newspaper, and then knowing that it would be, in a 19th century way, syndicated and spread around the Union. And he used those letters to cultivate support for the Union cause. You mentioned radio. Think about Franklin Roosevelt reaching into individuals' sitting rooms, their parlors, their living rooms, connecting individually with citizens and voters, not mediated through party bosses or party systems. That was also a way in which a new technology could be uniting, yes, rather than dividing.
Herman Goebbels too.
Yeah, right. No, but I'm just saying that the technology itself doesn't determine how it's used. It's how we choose to use it.
I agree with that. As a matter of fact, I believe it was Plato who was objecting to writing down poetry and drama instead of reciting it. He thought that would have a deleterious effect on people's memories. So every time there is a new technology is, it's like anything. You can use TNT to blow a hole in a mountain and make it a lot safer and faster to go from point A to point B, or you can use it to blow up a federal building, So any technology you use can be used for the good or the bad. And so when Jay says it's up to us, the people, I think one of the things that it's up to us to do is to be cognizant of what the good side and the bad side of this new technology is, and it's up to us to decide, is it going to be used for the good? Is it going to be used to open horizons and understand things that we couldn't have understood before because we have instant communications? Or are we going to narrow down our focus so that we're just getting news for, by, and about fellow vegan yoga practitioners who knit? You can really burrow into some really strange wormholes.
Okay, I've got a question here from someone online. How do you have civil conversations when the leadership blocks and punishes it? Don't all jump at once. How do you have civil conversations when the leadership blocks and punishes it?
Well, I
Woody?
don't know who you're referring to, but I know this. You just keep talking. It's like AI. I mean, will it be used for good or will it be used for harm? The answer is both. If there's a way to abuse it, somebody will find it and abuse it. If there's a way to do something great with it, somebody will eventually find it and use it. So it's going to be both. And we know that before we ever start. If somebody tells you not to talk to that guy or those people are all evil, remember what Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, the line between good and evil does not run between one group and another. It runs down the heart of every human being. Don't believe them when they tell you everybody on this side of the line is good, everybody on that side of the line is bad. That is a lie. Don't believe it. The guy on the other side has something to say. Listen to him. If somebody tries to shut you down, say, please leave, and go on talking. There's not, I don't know why, when they advertised this thing tonight, they said it'll be a safe place. I don't know what is safe from. What are you afraid of? I don't understand this.
I think what people, I can tell you what we meant when we said a safe space. We wanted to create a place where people feel that it's okay to voice a concern, ask a question, voice an opinion that will reveal what their political ideology is, and not feel that in doing so, someone is going to yell at them, call them a name, shout
so
them down.
My response is, if you don't feel it's safe, do it anyway. That's my, it's the only answer I can give you.
And that requires courage. That requires courage, and that requires the willingness to engage.
That's right.
And we, as a people, collectively have not engaged in this democracy to the extent that we all can and should.
And we never have. But if you don't have the courage to do it, then I recommend you go home and not stop worrying about it. But if we don't have the courage to do it, then it isn't going to happen. We're back to Jay. It's up
Then
to
we're back
us,
to
the
where,
people.
yeah.
Okay,
So
Linda.
find the courage.
Oh, we have a
Okay,
question
Jean, you got
way
that side of
back
the
here.
question?
I would just like to say I showed courage by bringing up the 2005 World Series. Okay, and after he asks his question, I have an online question too.
Okay.
Sir.
Thank you. It's a two-part question. One is, what gives the right of the government to profile the way they're profiling? The reason I bring that question up is my brother in California was stopped by ICE for no reason. He's an American citizen, but he was stopped. The other part of the question, 1920s, 1954, there was the Reparation Act. There was also, I hate this expression, Operation Wetback, where they took all the Hispanics, taking them all down to Mexico. And half of those people that were taken there were American citizens. What gives the government the right to do that?
Jay?
They don't have the right to do that. And I think the example that you used from the 1950s is a glaring one. You could think about the internment of the Japanese Americans a decade beforehand. So there is no right to deport American citizens in that manner.
And you're seeing it challenged in court, but it's not, it's frustrating because it's not the decisions aren't coming fast enough to prevent some of the actions that you're talking about. But yeah, there's a long history of abuses in this country that we then recognize as abuses later.
I would just recommend come back September 9th. We're going to talk about immigration in this room. So come back with your questions. Okay, Linda, before I turn it back over to you, this is online. I grew up in Kansas. I'm a tax and spend liberal. However, I typically voted for Bob Dole because he would work across the aisle to get things done. How do we bring compromise back into politics?
Love that question.
So who wants, love that question. And of course, I'm going to say quickly, vote for the right person. Ask them that question, but over to you guys.
I'll say one thing. You know, I'm old enough to have covered Bob Dole. So, and Bob Dole got a lot done. I mean, he could be a tough politician, but he got a lot done with humor. And one of the big differences, I would say, between the Senate and Congress of that era and now is the politicians really do not get along in the way that they did, say, 20, 30 years ago. And that has had a real impact in how the public's business gets done. So there's a lot of theories about why that is. One of my theories is it doesn't explain everything in the Senate, but it certainly explains the House. I do think gerrymandering has had, and gerrymandering and big money in politics have had a real impact on who gets elected. And you know, it's shocking to me that of 435 House seats, only 50 are competitive nationally, 50. And in the last election, there was not a single congressional seat in Missouri that was competitive. Now, what does that tell you? That tells you that the districts have been drawn in such a way to make them automatically Democratic or automatically Republican.
Yep.
My own town, I live in Columbia, Missouri, and the line for our congressional districts goes right down Broadway. City Hall is in one district, and the University of Missouri is in another. Imagine if you're the mayor. You know, it's really hard to get things done.
Well, we are really dealing with this right now in Texas. We have a special legislative session that just went into session yesterday, and one of the big things on the agenda, at President Trump's behest, is redistricting, so that the Republicans can pick up 5 seats in Texas.
But when I want to explain to people, you know, for a lot of people, like, who controls Congress might not seem important. It's not a question of who controls Congress. But like, if you drew a congressional district that kept the city of Columbia, which is the 4th largest city in Missouri, intact, which seems like the right thing to do, it would not be an automatically Democratic district. It would be a competitive district. Mm-hmm. That means the person elected, whether that person be a Republican or a Democrat, would be more centrist, right, more likely to compromise. Right. So when you have a whole country, I mean, jump in, Woody, if you disagree with me, but when you have a whole Congress that is super Democratic districts and super Republican districts, and all those people have to worry about is, am I going to get primaries?
It just adds to the polarization.
They're going to go to the furthest extreme of their party,
right,
and when they get to Congress, they not only are unable to compromise, they don't want to compromise, because compromising will make them look bad to the party base. So I think this is a huge problem. I think it's infected the Senate in psychological ways, but I think this is a big, big problem. You know, it's the people's house.
Right.
But they're picking you, you're not picking them.
Exactly. Okay, we've got a question over here. You've been very patient, sir.
Thank you. You guys have talked about civil discourse between opinions. Nobody has talked about the fact we do not have a shared reality. We're not dealing with a single set of facts. What do we do about that before we can talk civilly about opinions?
Well, that's part of what we were talking about before. The reason for that is the media silos that we're in.
No, I think all of you are doing a really good job. The first thing I would tell you is put down the screens and look up, because it's the algorithmic news feeds that you're getting through social media and on your screens that are siloing people. You know, what it does is we already have confirmation bias. That's a feature of human psychology, right? But algorithms put that on steroids. So you need to be aware when you're looking at digitally created media that's fed to you digitally, that is what you're seeing is being determined by what algorithms know about where you shopped and what you liked. And you know, there's a whole data, there are big companies that are worth a lot of money because they mine data and can create profiles of people. And you've been profiled. You know, we talked about physical profiling here. All of us have an online profile. So I think a big part of this is getting away from, I mean, we're not going to I'm not saying turn off the internet, right? It's very useful. I use it every day. But be aware of how the internet uses you so that you can use the internet more wisely.
And you have to be active and proactive in where you choose to get your news and not just look at one location or another. Okay, Jean, you've got a question over there.
Let me, okay.
I want to follow up on you. We live in different universes. That's absolutely true. If you have watched Fox News in the last few days, over and over and over again, you see one image, and it's some illegal immigrant shooting an ICE agent in New York. And you can't watch Fox for 5 minutes and not see that video. If you're watching MSNBC, they've shown it once and they're never going to show it again. And so you live in one world if you watch MSNBC and I watch Fox, and I live in the other world. And Jack Cashel, my dear, very right-wing friend, pointed this out 20 years ago. He was ahead of the rest of us. He said, we're living in different universes. We do not think reality looks the way other people think reality looks. And the answer to your question, at least from me, is I have no idea, other than what you've said, which my old captain who flew in World War II used to say, stop looking at the instruments and get your head up out of the cockpit and look around. Other than that, I don't know. But we are living, the MSNBC world is not the Fox News world. There's just no resemblance between them.
Okay, I think Jay wants to jump in before we move on to the next question. Go ahead,
Quinn might
Jay.
be able to say something from the younger person's perspective that, dealing with these technologies all the time. But I just say, maybe don't look for the media to solve this problem or the internet or the algorithms. Think about the different responsibilities of our social institutions, those that remain, and those being places in which you can actually cultivate and exchange ideas. And we have the luxury, being in higher education, we're not on a 24-hour news cycle. We don't have to pass a bill on some artificial timeline. We get to play the long game with students. You don't stigmatize them, you don't embarrass them, you don't say you're not living in reality. You work with them, you engage with them. It takes stamina and persistence and charity, a charitable approach to it. It's a long-term problem that's going to require a long-term collective response. Okay, what does it look like from the student's perspective?
I'm going to jump in. We have a bunch of more questions, so I'm sorry, Quinn, but I think we need to move on, because, you have 2 sentences, speak.
I think Jay said everything correctly. I think it's a matter of speaking to one another charitably, respecting one another's opinions. We all live in different realities to some extent, so treat it the way you would always treat it in speaking to one another kindly.
Okay, that was 4 lines, but it was really good. Before we have another kinder question here, I just want to give all of you a compliment. An answer to your question. You all are doing something about this problem by being here tonight. You could be home watching CNN, MSNBC, Fox. I've also noticed none of you have been on your devices.
Exactly.
If you are, I missed it. But good for you. This is the solution to the problem. Get out there, turn off your TV, talk to each other. So good for you. You guys are the solution. Okay, finally, your turn.
So throughout the panel, we kind of identified the 2 major problems for our inability to have effective discussions. The first being institutions like social media, news outlets, and political parties, and the second being us, the people, and our fostering of that fuel. And one of you described it as a problem, and the solution to it is it should be built from the bottom up. It should be solved by us first and foremost. So my question is, what should the people in this room do once they leave to foster that growth and that solution, and not only themselves, friends, families, and communities, but also to address the problems in our institutions?
Great question. Great question.
Give that guy another round of applause for his student. Can I just say real quickly that I love what you're getting at there, because, the real problem is people saying, if my guy just wins the next election, or if this next big bill just gets passed, that'll solve it. That's not how these problems were originated, and that's not how they're going to be resolved. There's going to be a decentralized response. So what can you as an individual do? You can find somebody or something, an organization, an institution. If one doesn't exist, you can create it. that is building constructive solutions to problems in your immediate community. That's what you can do. That's how problems get resolved. That's how the United States has changed historically. Can I just say one quick thing about the New Deal to nerd out? 15 seconds. We think about the New Deal, that big, innovative moment in American politics, as something that was top down. It really wasn't, or that was only part of the story. It was actually also a constellation of reforms from the bottom up, including those at the state level. Don't ever forget the importance of state politics. And also the examples from abroad, from overseas, of how different societies had also tried to navigate through the troubled waters that looked quite similar in their societies to the ones that we were facing. So look abroad, look at your immediate surroundings, and try to do something to answer your question, the idealistic high schooler.
Okay, we've got a question back here.
1976, Kansas City hosted the Republican National Convention, and a certain person got up and gave a talk, the keynote speech, Ronald Reagan, and most of us in the crowd were in our 20s and 30s, and we watched since Reagan's administration how much more power the president's gotten, and I want to know if we can go back to a free different parts of government.
Okay, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because that's one of the questions that I have as well, and I kind of was hinting at that a little bit in the first question that I asked Jay. So, you know, we've got 3 branches of government, and the way, it's my understanding, and you, of course, the expert here, but the way that the Constitution was framed was so that the 3 branches of government are checks and balances on each other, and there's push and pull, and no one is supposed to be more powerful than the other. So that's not where we are right now. So how do we get back to that? And I'm looking at you.
You're looking at me, okay, I'm sorry.
I'm looking at you, Mr. Kinder Institute.
Oh, I mean, I think that it really, one way of reading the root of our, the problems of our political class and our political system is the impotence of Congress as an institution, and it's something that both parties are part of. I think the Republican Party particularly right now, but it's been a long-running trend. The aggregation of executive power, really from the Cold War onward, I see that actually as very difficult to stop in the kind of world order that we're entering now, which demands more executive power and is going to create more kind of foreign policy crises. So we're swimming against the current on that front. And then, of course, the judiciary that's been mentioned earlier, that you have to have a judiciary that is willing to make the difficult calls and then hold the executive branch to account in the ways that it can. So I don't have the solution other than to say that is the big problem with our actual constitutional system right now. What can individuals do? You've got to vote for Congress people that will show a backbone, doesn't matter which party it is, that will respect Congress as an institution, that will know that Congress has certain powers that it and it alone can pursue.
And do what Jim was saying before, which is put country over party and not vote in their own personal best interests, but what's best for the country.
But that means people have to be vigilant. If you watch cable television, you would think there was one elected official in the United States of America. And we have got to get back to, people get frustrated because they vote for this one or that one for president, and life doesn't change. Well, life is changed by school board members and city council members and state legislators. And by the way, it's the state legislators who will decide who draws the congressional lines, and that determines whether that member of Congress is representing you or representing a special tribal interest. So I think people just have to get much more engaged in civil society and how it works and demand more information. You know, when I first started in the newspaper business, we covered state legislative races. We don't do that anymore. People, editors will say, oh, that's too much process, people aren't gonna read it. You get the information, you click on. We know exactly what you're clicking on. And if you're clicking on the Donald Trump scandal du jour, you're going to get more of that. If you click on a meaty story that's going to give you information to make good decisions about your future and the future of your kids and your grandkids, you'll get more of that.
Okay,
So
we're going to wait, we're out of time. And before Kansas City Public Library kicks us out, I think we can go over a little bit. So panelists, this is going to be a lightning round, okay? Imagine you're on some game show, and if you talk too long, I'm going to go buzz. I have 2 questions from online, and we have one more Kinder question.
And I've got some over here as well.
I'll finish. Oh, Carrie, can we keep going? Carrie says we can keep going.
Keep going.
So Linda, I'll finish.
To leave, we won't take it personally.
I'll finish this side of the room and turn it over to you. So 2 online, lightning round. First one to you, the next one to you, I think, Woody. The Supreme Court ruled that the president cannot be prosecuted for actions relating to his or her core responsibilities. Who decides what those core responsibilities are? And before you answer, Jay, I'll give you time to think. How does one get money out of politics? Okay, go. The money out of politics is Woody's. You're who decides what the core responsibilities are?
I mean, that's the key question. I would imagine it'll be the justices of the Supreme Court, and I imagine that they will, as they always are, be somewhat responsive to public opinion on this question. So it's not like we're totally locked out, but it is the key critical question.
Okay. Great lightning round answer.
You get money out of politics?
Yes.
You don't. James Farley said it is the mother's milk of politics. Money is the mother's milk of politics. He was Franklin Roosevelt's postmaster general and chief fundraiser. I add to that, money is the mother's milk of politics. Hypocrisy is its daily bread. But you're not getting money out of politics. You can't have people who have property and money who aren't going to fight to keep it. It is
true. It's a great, truthful answer.
Woody, can I ask a follow-up? Did you have another question over there, Jean?
I have one more question over here, but if you get follow-up for him.
I just wanted to ask, if we can't get money out of politics, then what can we do when it comes to the financial piece?
You pay attention to who's paying it. I have seen people think, look, if you can be cynical or you can be skeptical. Cynical is what Vladimir Putin wants you to be. Oh, they're all the same. We can't do anything, so let's give up on democracy. I'm a political reporter. I've seen plenty of people with a lot of money go, flat on their face. If people know the election is being bought, they vote the other way. So I agree with you. You can't get money out of politics, but we have the technology to do 24-hour disclosure, and that's going to maybe cause people to vote differently. So
okay, one more question from this side of the room, then over to you to close it out. One more, Kinder.
So we've spoken a lot about charity, and I think that's a very good point. And we've also talked about how community is like kind of the basis of how we do this. But I think it gets thrown around a lot that people in my generation feel more isolated than like many other generations in the past, and there's a sense that community is like really deteriorating and people don't seem to have that sense of community. So how do we push through these grassroots sort of like changes when it feels like a lot of people, especially that grew up around our time, really don't feel like they have that community to reach out to and talk to and start that impetus of movement?
Okay, Quinn, you're on.
Yeah, I think obviously social media has been a huge issue for us, and I think this is one drop in the bucket, but there's an impulse among members of our generations that if somebody disagrees with us politically, we need to immediately cut them off. And I think a big part of building that community, we need to stop doing that for civil dialogues. And then in terms of just meeting people, I think we need to start placing limits on our social media, kind of what Linda was talking about at the beginning, people intentionally getting off their phones. And we've talked about technology being a conduit for both good and bad things. I think it's time for us to sort of take a little bit more personal responsibility, recognize the bad things, use it for good, and also recognize when we need to get off of it.
Thank you, Quinn. I think we've got a couple more, 2 or 3 more over here, and then some in the center. Yes.
I'm going to take a more optimistic view. When I was a child, there was one TV station, one in Kansas City. It was owned by the Star. The Star had a monopoly on all news in this town. Now, I will admit some of the viewing today is stovepiped. It's narrowcast. But I can go on, I can read The Guardian, I can read foreign papers, I could go to a variety of sources. You couldn't do that 50 or 60 years ago. And the Star got complacent, as did other daily newspapers. So I can't really shed many a tear for their demise.
No, well, it's how you use the technology. Yes, you can use the internet to widen out your view, or you can use it to narrow your view. So you're absolutely right. There's a whole lot more choice, but you have to make the choice. You have to proactively make the choice and not just consume what's fed to you by the algorithms.
The other
Not
thing
as easily, no.
I always like to do a shout out for this. There's a great online resource called allsides.com, which is a great place to go to get whatever headline you want to get, whatever the news stories of the day are. And it's a site that rates media bias, but then it shows you the same story from the left, the right, and the center. And then you can read it for yourself and make up your own mind where the truth lies, okay? But part of this is becoming educated media consumers and understanding that you can't just read one thing online and take it as gospel and not do, I mean, it takes work. All Sides, ALLSIDES.com. It's an incredible site. Okay, yes, your question, excuse me.
Yes, Jack, what goes at first. I was at a meeting that you and Jack Cashel had put on, had a few hundred people a couple of decades ago, and we couldn't have been at more opposite sides on the subject matter. And then afterwards, we all met in front of the stage, and people were asking from all the, how are the kids, you know, what's happening to this person, and you know, and we all went home. And how do we recreate? It's not just get back to that. How can we create more opportunities to do that?
How can we create more opportunities to do that? Excuse me. One of the things is by coming to things like this. Woody, you want to?
Yeah, I'm deaf. I'm sorry. You're going to have to repeat the question.
He was saying that he had attended something that you were at 20 some odd years ago, and there were people on opposite sides of the topic. And at the end, everybody came together and asked, "How are your kids? How's life?" And the question is, how do we recreate that?
Well, we got to start drinking again.
Well, there's that.
I'm not entirely in jest. They do not drink in Jefferson City anymore. Back when the Democrats were running it, and they were very conservative Democrats, and the Republicans in it, you didn't have to be in the same party with the guys who ran the place because they all drank together. Nobody drinks anymore. They don't play cards together. They don't talk together anymore. And the answer to your question is, if that's what you want, call Cashel up and say, let's do this. Do what they're telling you here. Get engaged. So call Jack and say, Jack, we did this great thing 20 years ago. How do we get that started again? And the only meetings I get invited to today are, you're right, they're all one team or all the other. There's nobody from the other side of the room in there. So,
okay, last question.
But you can make it happen.
Last question.
So this speaks to something I've faced myself. I would definitely fall into one of those people who has fallen into media hole. I am very focused on my side of the spectrum. But say, as an example, an issue very near and dear to my heart is Palestine. There has been over 500,000 deaths in a Gaza Strip of 2 million people. Multiple scholars have called this a genocide. When people within my own party refuse to recognize this, it is hard to have these civil discussions when it is about human life. It is about the right to life.
So what's your question?
So my question is, how would you work over these lines? How are you going to cross such massive divides? Thank you.
And that's such a huge issue. I'm glad you brought it up. How do we cross that divide, Jay?
Well, I think we first wait for Woody to buy a round of drinks for everybody. Then we'll deal with the Middle East. But I mean, hey, it's a tough question, and like you can think about it historically. There have been these issues that committed moral issues that people just feel like it's so important, this one issue, we just can't do business with anyone who doesn't agree with it. Alcohol, actually, prohibition was one of those issues on the other side of Woody's position. Of course, anti-slavery would be another one. I would just say that if you really want to make a difference on something like that, you have to work through, you have to build a coalition, you have to have more allies. You can't police the boundaries tighter. You'll just find that your view will get ostracized and smaller. You have to reach out. And ultimately, of course, isn't that the lesson of the anti-slavery politics of the 19th century? That the really hardcore abolitionists who made no compromises and never tried to reach out beyond themselves, they weren't the ones that ended slavery. It was when the new Republican Party made inroads to other voters and built a durable political coalition. Incrementalism has a bad name in this generation. It's one of my pet peeves. Incrementalism, that's bad. These are moral questions. We have to solve them right now. We can't compromise. But historically, incrementalism is what delivers the good. So play the long game. You guys are young, not like us. Like, we can't play the long game anymore. You guys can.
I'm so glad that you brought that up and ended, or helping us end on that note, because it does take time, but as we've also been saying, it takes we the people being 100% engaged and not afraid to talk to somebody who doesn't think the way that we do.
Yeah, and I'll just add one thing, because I understand on an issue like that, when you feel that strongly and you feel a real sense of moral urgency, people are dying. When you're talking to somebody who has a different point of view, ask them this: tell me why you feel that way. Tell me why you feel that way, and then you can have a conversation.
Everybody's bringing their own perspective to the table. Help me understand. Help me understand. This has been amazing. For us, we are so thrilled. This is our largest Civil Dialogues audience to date. I think this is our 9th one, Jean?
So we've been in Houston, Austin, Washington, D.C., Little Rock, Arkansas. Where else have we been? Houston a number of times.
Yeah.
You all are the best audience.
St. Louis. Yeah.
You're the best. St. Louis. Oh, I forgot St. Louis.
Yeah.
You all are a great audience. You're going to save the world.
Yeah.
Particularly all of you with Kinder on your shirts.
Yes.
You're going to save the world.
We're so impressed with you. A huge thank you to Carrie Coogan and her staff here at the Kansas City Public Library for hosting us tonight. Thank you. As Jean mentioned earlier, we will be back here. I think the date is September 9th, and we will be talking about immigration. So whatever's going on with the immigration scene at that point, okay, we will be talking about that. So we hope you will come back. We hope you will follow us. You can go to civildialogues.us and see all that we are doing. And please just stay engaged, stay involved, and keep talking to each other.
We're coming back in November, too.
No, we're coming back.
We're coming back November 5th.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have your whole fall plan.
Yeah.
Come on back.
You're going to get sick of us. You're going to get sick of us. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good night.